Hey everyone, and welcome. Have you ever stopped to think about the invisible forces that decide how much you pay for things, or why you have a million choices for one product, but only one for another? Well, it all comes down to something called market structure. And in this explainer, we're going to break it all down and see exactly how these structures are shaping your world every single day.
I mean, just think about this for a second. When you want to buy some bread, you've probably got a bunch of different bakeries or grocery stores to choose from, right? But when you turn on the faucet at home, there's just one water company. Why is that? This simple question, this everyday puzzle, is actually the key to understanding everything we're about to talk about.
So the answer to our little riddle? It's a concept that economists call Marktformen, or market structures. You can think of them as the invisible rule book for the game of supply and demand. They set the stage and define the rules for how buyers and sellers interact with each other.
Okay, so what is a market structure technically speaking? Well, it's pretty much the blueprint of any given market. It's all about who's playing the game. How many sellers are there? How many buyers? Are their products basically the same or totally different? And how much does everyone know about what's going on? It's the framework that shapes the entire economy.
So let's break that down. All of these factors you see here are important, for sure. But honestly, it mostly boils down to the first two, the number of suppliers and the number of buyers. These two things are the absolute key drivers that create the different kinds of markets we're going to get into.
All right, let's meet the three main players in this story. These are the market structures you run into all the time, and they exist on a spectrum. On one end, you have this total free-for-all, just pure competition. And on the other end, you have the absolute total control of a single company.
First up, let's talk about the polypoly. Now, this is what economists dream about. It's the picture of perfect, pure competition. Think of a super busy farmer's market on a Saturday morning, where stalls everywhere and people buzzing about. In a polyopoly, you've got tons of sellers and tons of buyers, all in one place. And here's the crucial thing. No single person, whether they're selling apples or buying them, is powerful enough to set the price. The price just happens. It finds its own level through the natural push and pull of supply and demand. So these are the hallmarks. You've got lots of players, which means tons of competition. Because of that, everyone is what we call a price taker, not a price maker. You just have to accept the going rate. You see this everywhere, from your local market to the stock market to most of the retail world.
Okay, let's move on to our next major player, the oligopoly. Now, if the polyopoly was that crowded, chaotic marketplace, the oligopoly is more like a tense, high-stakes poker game with just a few powerful people sitting at the table.
In this setup, just a handful of big companies control almost the entire market. And the key idea here, the one you have to remember, is strategic interdependence. It just means that every company is constantly watching every other company. It's like a chess match. If one airline drops its prices for summer flights, you can bet the others are going to react instantly. So this market structure has some really unique features. It's really hard for a new company to break in. There's also a serious risk of illegal price fixing, where the big players all agree to keep prices high. But on the other hand, that intense rivalry can sometimes push them to create amazing new things. Classic examples? Think about your cell phone provider, the big car companies, or the major airlines.
And that brings us to the other end of the spectrum, the monopoly. This is where one single provider is the king of the hill, controlling the entire market. One for all and all for one provider.
In a monopoly, competition is basically zero. You have one company selling a product or service to a whole lot of buyers. And that gives this one company, the monopolist, incredible power. They get to decide the price, and they get to decide how much they're willing to sell.
The features are pretty straightforward. One seller, no direct competitors, and for you, the consumer, basically no choice. This is why we often see monopolies in utilities like water and power. It just wouldn't make sense to have multiple sets of water pipes running to your house. Another classic example is a national railway on a route where they are the only train service available.
Okay, so we've just met the big three. Now this chart here, the Stackelberg matrix, is the master key. It's a fantastic little grid that maps out all 9 possible market forms. You just look at the number of suppliers on the side and the number of buyers up top. So far, we've pretty much lived in that first column because that's what we as consumers usually face. But what about those other columns?
This brings up a really cool question. What happens when the whole script gets flipped, when the power shifts from the people selling the stuff to the people buying it? Yeah, that's right. The sellers don't always hold all the cards.
The absolute best way to get this is to look at a monopoly's mirror image, the monopsony. So, in a monopoly, you have one seller calling the shots for many buyers. In a monopsony, it's the exact opposite. You have one massive buyer calling the shots for many sellers. The perfect example is the government being the only customer for, say, a super advanced fighter jet.
And this is how that power on the buyer's side plays out. A monopsony, like we just said, is rare but incredibly powerful. A little more common, though, is an oligopoceny. That's where you have just a few huge buyers. Think about it. There are thousands and thousands of farmers growing food, but who do they sell to? A handful of giant supermarket chains. You tell me who has the power in that negotiation.
Okay, so we've gone through all these different economic models, but let's bring it all back home. Why does any of this actually matter to you? Well, because these structures directly impact your wallet, your choices, and your everyday life in a huge way.
Let's get right to it. How does this affect you? In a competitive polypoly, you tend to get lower prices and way more variety. In a monopoly, you pay what they want and you get what you get. Simple as that. Quality and service? Competition forces companies to be better. And in an oligopoly, that fierce rivalry is a double-edged sword. It can sometimes lead to incredible innovation as they all try to one-up each other.
This quote right here really just hits the nail on the head. This stuff isn't just some dusty theory in a textbook. It is the fundamental operating system of our economy. It's the reason behind the price tag on your clothes, the number of choices you have in the cereal aisle, and pretty much every political debate about corporate power.
And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. Looking ahead, how do today's digital giants, the massive platforms that run our search engines, social networks, and online shopping, how do they fit into these old models? Are they creating entirely new kinds of monopolies? And what is that going to mean for all of us in the markets of tomorrow? Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for tuning in.